you can navigate from one phase to another phase, and you can go back to the previous stage with the help of this model. The feasibility study is very important. It is good to detect errors in the same phase in which they are committed. There is a possibility of moving from present phase to the previous phase, that is called as a feedback path. Once the development phase started, it is very difficult to go back and do the changes in the prototype model. So that is very important thing. Hello everyone, it is Dr. Ravikumar YB, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, MYSURU, the Temple of Excellence. In today's session, you will be taught about the prototyping in the software process models. Generally, I have spoken about the prototyping models and different types of prototyping models which you will come across during the time of software development. But in today's session, you will be taught about the prototyping in the software process model, whether it is a waterfall model or an iterative model or an incremental model, or it may be any other V model or any of these models, how these prototyping models are used in case of software development lifecycle. That is going to be taught now. Then, iterative waterfall model. Usually, the waterfall model begins with the requirements analysis, and one of the phase is completed, then the next phase is moved. That means as soon as one of the phase is completed, the next phase begins. But there is no chance of going back to the previous stage if there is any mistake in the previous stage. That was the thing you observed in the previous sessions. But in today's session, you will be taught about the software engineering iterative waterfall model with the help of a prototype model. This involves a feedback. So let me show you that. The software development project is a classical waterfall model which is hard to use. That is classical model which I have already taught you in the previous session is very hard to use or very tough to use. So in order to make it useful and go back to the previous stage, if there is any mistake in the previous phase, we have incorporated this prototyping model in SDLC. That is in case of waterfall model. So iterative waterfall model can be thought of as incorporating the necessary changes to the classical waterfall model to make it usable in the practical software development projects. That is, you have seen that the requirements analysis, system design, then development, implementation, testing, maintenance and delivery. That is what you have seen. We are going to make few changes to it so that it is usable in the tough software development, practical software development projects. Let me show you that. It is almost the same as the classical waterfall model. That is, it is almost same as that, but there is a slight modifications to it, except the changes are made to increase the efficiency of the software development. That is, the efficiency of the SDLC is more in case of waterfall model, that is modified waterfall model. That is the main reason here. If that is the case, the iterative waterfall model provides feedback paths. The same thing I told you in the previous slide, from every phase to its preceding phases, which is the main difference from the classical waterfall model. That means you are going to get the feedback. In the classical waterfall model, I have taught you that this is given from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, and here to here. Was there any feedback path you observed in the previous states? Not at all possible. But in this case, you have a chance of moving back to the preceding stage, from maintenance to integration and testing, from integration and testing to the coding and unit testing, from coding and unit testing to the design phase, from design phase to this. So at last, you will also have the chance of moving back from this to maintenance to the requirements analysis. What does that mean? That means you can navigate from one phase to another phase, and you can go back to the previous stage with the help of this model, that is modified waterfall model. It is not like classical waterfall model. It is a modified waterfall model wherein you can navigate from the present state to the previous state, so that if there is any corrections needed in the previous stage, that can be incorporated and proceeded forward. When errors are detected at some later phase, these feedback paths allow correcting errors. That is the same thing. If there is any errors or mistakes in the previous phase, that can be incorporated in the previous phase by navigating it to the previous phase committed by the programmers during some phase. The same thing is explained here. Suppose if there is any errors, if there is any error observed in the previous phase, that has to be incorporated in the previous phase by navigating from the present phase. So that all necessary requirements of a client or customer shall be met by the developer. That is the main thing you need to observe here. The feedback paths allow the phase to be reworked in which errors are committed, and these changes are reflected in the later phase. That means if there is any errors identified in the previous phase, we can navigate from the present phase to the previous phase, and the incorporated changes shall be committed in the later phases, that is moved forward. We shall move forward and find the changes incorporated. That is the main thing you need to observe here. So, feedback path to the stage. What is the meaning of this stage? See here, observe here, feasibility study, because one of the project has been taken does not give up the project easily. That is, once the project is taken, the developers are not ready to give up that project. That has to be completed within a specific time. So, the feasibility study is very, very important. It is good to detect errors in the same phase in which they are committed. It reduces the effort and time required to correct the errors, because if there is any errors identified at the later stage of the software development life cycle, it has to be reworked, going back to the from the present phase to the previous phase. So in order to reduce the time required to do all those changes, it is better to correct at the same phase and move on forward from there, so that the efforts and time required to incorporate the changes necessarily required in that particular phase can be reduced. Then, phase containment of errors. What is the meaning of this? That means the principle of detecting errors as close to their points of commitment as possible is known as phase commitment of errors. That means if there is any error detected in the present phase of a of SDLC, then it shall be done incorporated as early as possible. That is called as phase containment. Yes, phase containment of errors. Next, feedback path. What is the meaning of feedback path? There is a possibility of moving from present phase to the previous phase. That is called as a feedback path. In the classical waterfall model, there were no feedback paths you observed. So there is no mechanism for error correction. There was no mechanism of error correction as you observed in the previous session. Now in the iterative waterfall model, feedback paths from one phase to its previous preceding phase allows error correction techniques are possible. That means so that it reflects in the later phases. The same thing is explained here. Feedback path. About the feedback path, in the classical waterfall model, you did not find any feedback path from the present phase to the previous phase, so that if there was any changes required in the previous phase, that was not able to incorporate at the later phase of the software development life cycle. But that is not the case with the iterative waterfall model. In case of this iterative waterfall model, if there is any changes required in the previous phase, that can be incorporated into it as soon as we identify the errors which needs to be recognized and corrected at the previous stage by navigating to the previous stage in the form of a feedback path. So that becomes, the software development becomes an updated one which reflects in the next and further stages of the software development life cycle. So if that is the case, it is simple. In terms of what? It is very simple to understand and use. It is very simple and understand to adopt in case of software development. That's why it is one of the most widely used software development models in the industry. Most widely used model in software industry. If that is the case, difficult to incorporate change requests. That means the major drawback of this iterative waterfall model is that all the requirements must be clearly stated before starting the development process, development phase. That is one of the difficult. That means if there is any changes required to be incorporated is missed out, then it has to be incorporated by moving back to the feedback path, and that has to be incorporated in the previous phase. That is very difficult in case of waterfall model. Then the customer may change the requirements after some time, but the iterative waterfall model does not leave any scope to incorporate change requests that are made after development phase starts. Please see to it here. It is a drawbacks of what iterative waterfall model, that is in terms of prototype. In case of this, if the customer comes back to incorporate any new changes into the existing model, then it is very difficult to incorporate those changes, because the requests made by the customer may lead to the difficulties and tough times for the development phase. Because once the development phase started, it is very difficult to go back and do the changes in the prototype model. So that is very, very important thing you need to understand here. And then another drawback is incremental delivery is not supported. As such, you have identified the incremental delivery in case of incremental waterfall model. At every iterations, you can do the changes and you can modify the system and do according to the requirements of a client. That is not possible with respect to the incremental delivery of incremental waterfall model. So it is not recommended to use the waterfall model because the incremental or any changes required at the later phase is not supported. Then there is no scope for any intermediate delivery. That means in the intermediate situations, it is not possible to deliver the prototype model to the customer. So that is also one of the important drawbacks which you can identify here in case of this iterative waterfall model. Then overlapping of phases is not supported because let me tell you very clearly this, we can't wait till the development team completes the project because the testing team will be waiting for the testing of software development. So we cannot overlap both of these. So until the completion of the development team, the testing team must wait. Until the requirements are collected, the development team must wait. So there is a sequentiality. There is a sequential execution of the process. So in order to do the overlapping, it is very difficult to incorporate these changes in the iterative waterfall model. And risk handling is not supported, which is also same in case of the classical waterfall model. That means the projects may suffer from various types of risks, but iterative waterfall model has no mechanism for risk handling. It has no mechanism to handle the risks. Then limited customer interactions. That means once the SRS is collected, not much interaction with the customer takes place in case of iterative waterfall model, because once when the interaction occurs, that starts at the beginning of the project, the time of requirements gathering and project completion at the same time of software delivery. So because there will not be any overlapping, once when the process starts from requirements analysis to development, if the customer comes back with any changes during the time of development, we cannot go back and ask him to suggest that this is the changes you had asked for. So that the requirements must be incorporated obviously. That leads to an effort in terms of time, which is very costly, and budget are another important criteria that needs to be addressed with iterative waterfall model. These fewer interactions with the customers may lead to many problems as the final developed software may differ from the customer's actual requirements. Yes, sometimes this happens because when the customer is having a limited interaction with the developer, there may be a possibility of not meeting every requirements of a customer. So that is also a possible case of this software delivery of the software product. So with this, I'm going to conclude this session. Thank you very much. Thank you one and all. If you have any questions with respect to the prototyping in the iterative software process model, that is waterfall model, not the classical waterfall model, kindly come back to me. I will be available in the college. I will teach you very well. I'm hoping you are following really very well. Thank you very much. Thank you one and all.